Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob Woodruff, Chief Operating Officer of the Missouri Botanical Garden. I'm delighted to welcome you to this very special virtual installment of the Member Speaker Series. Nearly a year ago, the Missouri Botanical Garden was on the front page of the Post-Dispatch to herald the coming of our new visitor center. Today, we are so excited to share with you a behind-the-scenes look at this project, which is the next milestone in the great history of the Missouri Botanical Garden. With our new Jack C. Taylor Visitor Center, the garden, our community, all who visit will benefit by having world-class facilities for one of the great treasures of St. Louis. Your loyal support of the garden has enabled us to have ambitious dreams. You, our members, are the foundation of the garden, and you have a critical role in this next chapter in the garden's history. This transformational visitor center will delight, restore, and help inform our visitors. Significantly, it will elevate our community, helping to build on the momentum we are now witnessing. From the Arch to Cortex to the new soccer stadium, this visitor center will amplify our community's revitalization. Our new visitor center enables us to engage with the community in both obvious and subtle ways. From the moment visitors approach the garden, their first view of the gardens in front of the iconic new building will bring excitement and anticipation to what lies within and beyond. The one-level building enables accessibility for all. The amenities make clear how much we value each visitor's needs and priorities. The materials and design reflect our mission to conserve and sustain our living world and the plants that sustain us. Surrounding the new building are new gardens and terraces featuring and representing the plant diversity of our region and the wider world. Our work throughout the world has given us an outstanding international reputation. We welcome visitors from our own neighborhood, from throughout the city and county, from across Missouri, from all 50 states, and throughout the world. We welcome school children, families, seniors, and scientists. Now, we will have a center that enables us to demonstrate our mission and that matches our global reputation. We hugely appreciate all of your support for the garden. That is why we want to give you this early look at the Jack C. Taylor Visitor Center. It's now my pleasure to introduce our panel of speakers this afternoon. After a nationwide search, the Garden's Board of Trustees selected the firm of Ayers St. Gross as the project architect. Ayers St. Gross is a 170-person multidisciplinary design firm with offices in Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Phoenix. It focuses on mission-driven clients in higher education and cultural institutions. From Monticello to the hub at Clemson University, their portfolio is extensive. Locally, ASG has designed buildings for other St. Louis institutions, including the Danforth Plant Science Center and Washington University. With us from ASG is Luann Green and Joel Fidler. Luann Green is president of Ayers St. Gross. With more than 30 years of design and planning experience, she is a strong advocate for smart and sustainable planning strategies that address the needs of both institutions and communities. Luann has worked with numerous colleges, universities, and cultural institutions across the nation, including The Ohio State University, Washington University in St. Louis, the Smithsonian Institution, and now the Missouri Botanical Garden. Joel Fidler is a principal at Ayers St. Gross with more than 20 years of experience designing and managing architectural projects. His involvement in projects of all sizes, from interior renovations to large-scale urban planning, allows him to reconcile comprehensive design ideas with sensitive and effective detailing. These projects reflect his strong interest in neighborhood revitalization, effective placemaking, and sustainable design solutions. Finally, it is my great pleasure to welcome today's moderator, Jamie Kolker. Jamie is a key member of the Jack C. Taylor Visitor Center Steering Committee. Jamie has been an architect and planner for over 30 years and is currently Associate Vice Chancellor and University Architect at Washington University in St. Louis. He is responsible for stewardship of the university's campuses, leadership of campus planning, and for the design and development of all capital projects. Before Washington University, Jamie was principal at Venturi Scott Brown and Associates, architects and planners in Philadelphia. There he worked on a wide range of academic and civic sites, including visitor centers for a Frank Lloyd Wright site and Storm King Art Center. Also joining us today is Patty Arnold, the Garden's Vice President of Institutional Advancement. Patty will conclude today's conversation. Before we dive in, a little bit of housekeeping. We have structured the program to be a conversation about our new visitor center. Due to time constraints, we're unable to take questions live during the program, but we have turned on the Q&A function so that you will have an opportunity to ask questions. We'll collect and respond to these questions in follow-up communications and during future speaker series programs. We intend this to be the first of many opportunities to preview this exciting project with you. Thank you, and now I will turn the program over to Jamie.
Thank you very much, Bob, and thank you, Luann and Joel, and thank everybody on the other side of my screen for joining us this afternoon and for wanting to listen to three architects have a chat. And I hope that's, I thank you for that. It's, we're eager and happy to share a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, some of these renderings and stories you may have heard, but others may be new to you, and share a little bit of how the process works, some amazingly beautiful renderings of different features of the new visitor center, and to talk a little bit about the history of the project, the firm's expertise, and some sort of anecdotal conversations or sort of stories about how the building and its design and the landscape has evolved. So Luann and Joel, I want to step back a little bit and talk about a big part of an architect's life is getting the work. So talk a little bit about both the experience you've had in similar projects and how you were selected by the Garden to be the planners and architects for this project.
Great. Well, thanks, Jamie. It's great to be here today. You know, I love thinking back on those early days and how we found each other. And so much of our firm's work and personally my career has been working around institutions where mission is always, mission forward, mission first. And how do you translate a mission into built form? And so whether at Monticello or Mount Vernon or our work at the Smithsonian, which has been everything from the National Zoo to the National Air and Space Museum, one of the consistent elements has been pulling that mission up and making it always be kind of ever present with you. And also large volume of visitorship and complex circulation. So the need to really suss out and tease those patterns and those paths. It's really wonderful today to be with everybody. I kind of wish we could see everyone, because I know a lot of folks who are joining us today are very frequent visitors to the Garden, who come frequently, who might even come as often as once a week. And then, as Bob said in his introduction, you have folks who are making a pilgrimage of a lifetime to come to the Garden. And we want the experience to be just as deeply meaningful for both groups, that full spectrum of folks. So that's really how we found each other, was through a series of investigations, and as the Garden was really starting to work on the concept for the project.
The other big piece of that, I think, is obviously, once you find the project and you're in conversations with the client, is building that team. And we have had a great relationship with a lot of consultants over the years. One of our really key partnerships is with Michael Vergen Landscape Architects, who have worked with us on many of the projects that Luann mentioned. And Michael and his team bring such a presence and experience and knowledge base to all of their projects. And so we were really excited to partner with Michael on this project, and then to really engage the St. Louis community in terms of filling out the rest of the consultant team with some real outstanding design and engineering expertise, but also a really strong knowledge base of the city, the kinds of in and outs of getting projects permitted, but also understanding the significance of the Botanical Garden and the other cultural institutions in and around town.
And I see there are a lot of familiar names of companies that WashU has worked with and that we all know, but this represents really tens, if not You have over 40 people every week on a call, I think it is.
Those are interesting phone calls, I'll say. Yeah. It's a lot of people at the table that are all rowing in the same direction to get this project moving, to keep it moving.
And I think just looking at this list and reminding ourselves of this incredible partnership and who's not on this list, but is an important partner and Ayers & Gross needs and we need is the garden and the garden staff and the garden leadership and the garden trustees and board and steering committee who really together make a project. You need a good client, you need a good architect, you need a good design team, and you need a good builder. And I think this project clearly has all of the above. And I think that you can't have a successful project without all three of those really being devoted, experienced, passionate. And I think this project really is going to be successful and has been successful to date with that. So it's a good list.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we can't say enough about all the work that the garden staff has done in terms of not only just setting aside time from their busy days to deal with us and the project while they're still doing their full-time job, but the knowledge and the experience that they all bring, obviously, in terms of the facilities and just helping envision and really kind of leading some of this thought evolution about what the botanical garden of the future looks like and how the visitor center can work in the coming years.
So once you built your team and started the kickoff and understood a little bit about the context, how do you start? How do you start even turning, Luann, as you said, sort of turning the mission and the values of the institution into something physical and practical and operationally efficient, et cetera? How do you dive in? What's first?
Right. Well, it is. I really enjoy that early part of every project. It's so fascinating to me. I'm just so curious about how the place works and what makes it tick and how does it fit together, especially in an institution like this one where the range of drivers is so broad. And we wanted to understand the research and scholarship. We wanted to understand in situ impacts that the garden is having around the world, as well as understanding like the details of the visitors who come to the garden on a regular basis. What are the programs that are being hosted? How do they change through the year? What happens when the weather's great, right? And it happens to be great on a weekend and drives visitorship really way up. How do these things work? So you see on this image, not only, sketches and ideas of how we might organize the site, early ideas, we're building models, we're trying to understand the scale of things, but that middle part of the slide where we're diagramming not design, but you're diagramming the relationships that people want to have. And while on the one hand, we've talked about these, really high-minded ideas of mission and impact, and of course, the world needs conservation leaders right now more than ever, and the science that the garden brings to the world. But you also know that when a visitor, arrives at the garden, probably the first thing they want to find is a restroom. And so there are hyper practical things that we want to be thinking about. And so what I love about projects like this is really toggling between those two realms almost, in every meeting. And you can see some of those meetings with the 40 plus people. These happen to be pictures of meetings that were on site. But Jamie, you'll remember you and Bob and a couple others of us, went to Monticello to see that. We went to Longwood Gardens. We have been to other reference points in St. Louis, many of the cultural institutions, really just trying to deeply understand what we're shooting for.
And I would say that the upshot of doing all of this work, all of this, kind of background research and understanding, and digging into the practicalities of the garden, as well as what their vision is to really get to some planning principles in this phase of design. And so, we take a step back at this point after you go through all of that work and say, how can we distill this into some guidance for the project moving forward? And these planning principles that were developed were really generated by the garden as these primary drivers of would shape the project in the future. And you know, that first one, that notion of bringing the garden experience forward, you know, we can touch on this later, but is really kind of this landscape forward idea of what do you want that that first experience to be when you pull into the property, is to experience the garden. There's a ton of great assets that are already on site, great historic buildings, landscapes, you know, horticultural jewels that fit into a framework. And so we spent a lot of time during this planning process kind of figuring out what that framework is and looking at some of these axes so that we can expound upon those connections, both for views and circulation. And then, you know, really thinking about what does this visitor center want to be today, but also how can we make it flexible so that it functions and it works for the kind of unknown future. You know, you think about where we were at this point last year versus where we are now and how different the world is. Who knows what it's going to be like next year or 10 years down the road. So building in as much flexibility as you can to allow for an adaptation of whatever this building and this project wants to be in the future for the garden. So those are really important pieces as we continue to move forward in the design.
So let's dive into the design. I mean, with these diagrams, with the precedents,
Yep.
with the principles, talk
Yep.
a little bit, you know, and so critical to this,
Right.
obviously, clearly, is the relationship of landscape to building. And so
Yep.
talk a little bit about
Yep. And I'll channel my inner Michael Ferguson at this point, because Michael, as Joel said, Michael Ferguson has been such a close partner of ours for, 25 plus 30 years. And we've worked together on so many projects. And as Joel talked about with the planning principles, one of the key design elements was to bring the garden closer to the point of arrival as quickly as possible. So really, as soon as you arrive, that you have that experience of the garden. So this idea of pulling the gardens to the north, pulling them up through the building. And so what we refer to as that north garden on the front slope would be really immediately really outside the visitor center, so you could have that experience, increase that excitement, increase that feeling of arrival to the garden right away. One of the inspirations that we've had, both Michael and Glenn Neighbors, one of our key partners and a great designer in our firm, really looked at were precedents around garden architecture, greenhouses, and other gardens in other buildings and gardens. And this simple idea, and you can see in that little diagram, those sort of red lines representing the north sides of any garden architecture tend to be more solid, and the south sides, represented by those blue lines, tend to be very glassy, right? And the roofs very glassy and kind of penetrating sunlight deep into the space is one of the tenets. And we really use that here as well. So once you're in the building and spill out, Bob mentioned it's really a one-story building, and really that was to increase the continuity between the outside and the inside. So the north garden leads to the lobby leads to the south garden, that leads to the Linnaean House, and they're really all at one level. So the ground floor of the new visitor center is the same as the ground floor level of the Linnaean House, and all of those gardens between will now be all at the same level. Today there's a bunch of stairs that you have to navigate around. So this idea of very fluid, really close collaboration as we design the project. You know, the landscape architects are in the same meetings with the architects are in the same meetings with the landscape architects, because of the close, we just want the project to be as seamless as possible. So how are vistas being capitalized on, whether they're long vistas, you know, way down historically through the garden, or close in newer vistas of the new immediate gardens. So that really close collaboration was really critical. And I'm hoping that maybe there'll be future sessions like this really focused on the planting and the landscape, which we're not going to get deeply into today. One other quick element I'll just mention is there are, just like the garden has a series of absolutely spectacular fountains throughout the garden, this project continues that tradition and pulls water through the entire composition in the gardens, including out to the front north garden.
It continues to be a very fun process with Michael and his team. The way that we think about the project, and as Luann mentioned, there's kind of the big pieces and the detail pieces, and the way that you can flow from thinking big picture, what does that mean in detail? Well, if we have to work it out a certain way, maybe that changes the big picture again. A lot of the fountains, and just kind of understanding, for example, how those fountains work and how people move around them and how much space they want to have. Those types of things have a big impact on the overall plan. So it's fun kind of getting into the weeds on some of these things and then moving back out and continuing to do that both inside the building and in the landscape design.
So from the landscape framework, we start
Okay,
to, what does the building look like, and what is it made out of? And
Right,
how does it
right,
sit in the landscape? Yeah.
right. And one of the key things about any visitor center, but particularly a visitor center for a destination as spectacular as the garden, is on the one hand, do you want it to be quiet? You're not coming necessarily to see the visitor center, you're coming to see the garden. You might be coming to an event in the visitor center. So you want it to be clear, you want it to be welcoming, you want everyone to feel welcome there, and lower confusion, especially for a first-time visitor who may not know exactly where everything is. But at the same time, you want to heighten excitement. You want to make the days, the event, seem even that much more special. So it was important to have a certain simplicity and elegance to the design, but also have these key moments, and I know Joel will talk about that in a minute, of the lobby and these beautiful glassy elements that are really draw the visitor to that clear entry point.
Yeah, it's obvious where the entrance is once you drive in because of the lantern and in the evening, during the day, and that will really be the memorable moment for sure.
Yeah. So talking about that arrival kind of sequence, the drive in, I just want to kind of highlight what that experience will be. The parking lot itself isn't really changing a whole lot. That area is going to remain pretty consistent. There's just a few slight modifications, and the drive itself in is going to remain pretty much unchanged. But the big change, obviously, is what happens at the end of that vista as you pull in. This notion of not only seeing the garden as the first visual at the end of that vista, but then seeing, the lantern, that kind of that beacon, that symbol that pulls you towards it. From a visual standpoint, we thought was really compelling and really, as Luann mentioned, simple for first-time visitors to navigate, but also, refreshing for people that are familiar with it to go through that experience. But it wasn't enough just to see the North Garden, but to move through the North Garden is a big piece of this. It's something that is a garden unto itself, so it will have the horticultural attributes, some rotating plantings. There are really kind of ample walkways and wide spaces for people to move around, places for people to sit, for people to stop and enjoy the garden itself. So really making that the first destination, the North Garden, was something that we thought was really significant, and the garden really pushed us into how to make this that type of space.
Yeah. Joel, I was just thinking, it's not only the first experience, it's also the last experience. And I'm thinking about how many times you and I have been to meetings at the garden, and we're waiting for our Uber to come to take us away. And someone asks us to take a picture of their group. They're at the end of a great experience, a great day. And it's an important ending point for a lot of people too.
It is.
So can we go inside?
We can. So we'll, before we go inside, just to kind of orient folks, some people may have seen this floor plan and understand it. Just want to kind of quickly lay out some of those, kind of significant organizing pieces of the floor plan. So the lobby you'll see there on axis with a main entry drive. Off the lobby, we do have the gift shop. We have the sassafras dining area. We have ticketing, and as Luann mentioned, restrooms, which are critically important to that first step into the building. But then, what you see here, when you see the yellow, those are the public-facing spaces. They're all on one level, as Luann mentioned, which means that they all are very easily accessible. You're not having to go up and down stairs. You're not having to go in an elevator to get to any of those spaces. But what they all do, you can see, is that they all face out towards the south. The concerted effort to push all of those spaces so that they have views, they have vistas, they have natural sunlight was really one of the drivers of this particular plan configuration. And then you'll see the event center all the way on the right-hand side of your screen, which does have a separate lobby. And the idea there is that that's a space that can be folded into the everyday use of the project, and the garden can use on a daily basis. But it's also remote enough that you could have a private event or some type of learning activity or something happening over there and not disturb the regular flow of folks through the main building. So really trying to build in that versatility and that flexibility that we talked about earlier. Once you get to the lobby, we'll take you inside and kind of show you some of the experience of what we're intending in here. That first pass in, the idea here, hopefully as you can see from this rendering, is that you have this beautiful vista out into the rest of the garden, that the landscape is kind of pulling you through the space. And that's really important from a view standpoint, but also in the materials that we've used in the lobby space. The metal panel that you see on the wall, the kind of warm zinc, is the same material that's on the outside of the building that starts to pull in. The flooring material is this kind of flow of the exterior paving material into the lobby and then back out again. So really this kind of inside-outside flow is very deliberate. But at the same time, you don't want people to just pass right through the lobby. You want them to stop and enjoy and understand what's going on. So the idea here is that this volume, this high volume with this metal perforated scrim that moves around it, is really a place for people to stop and kind of think, get their bearings, experience the space, and then continue the rest of their journey. And as we all know, the garden isn't just a 9-to-5 operation. There are events and other things happening in the evening. And so thinking about this space in particular and how it functions, what it looks like in the evening, we spend a lot of time looking at the lighting, particularly of this scrim, of this volume, and trying to understand what it could do at night and how we can make it dynamic and a really special place. And so there are uplights that will have this thing glow from the outside. It'll glow from the inside. There'll be color changing so that the garden can set different colors depending on the different festivals could each have different colors or different things going on. So really customizable, but also very unique and very special for the garden.
The south side is 95% glass, really, and you'll see that. Yeah. I mean, it's so different. The contrast between the north and the south, I think, is pretty striking. Yeah.
It is, and as Luann mentioned, very deliberate, right? That's that really showcases the garden, and the idea is that the building here is designed to support the garden, and so that notion of blurring the line between inside and outside, making the spaces feel like they flow. They're all active spaces along that glassy wall, so people have an opportunity to move in and out of the building with ease, is really an important piece of this. You'll also see that this trellis along the south side, the cantilever trellis here, is another piece that kind of continues that ceiling plane and it also blurs that line between inside and outside and makes people feel like they can take that next step outside with ease.
So I know, we've gotten a taste of the from sort of the eye level, but also looking at it from above here, you can see some of the interrelationship of the landscape and the architecture, the trellis and the conservatorium. We'll see a little bit more about that to come in the future slides, but this really gives a great overview of the different pieces of how the garden, this blurring of the line as you described it.
Yeah. And I think it also shows, just from a flow standpoint, you know, the garden is accommodating all types of visitors and really large groups, you know, that come together. You know, they come as 30 or 40 person groups. There's individuals that come, families, you know, there will be scientific research that happens, and folks moving about the facility on that front as well. So really designing these spaces that are large and spacious enough to accommodate all types of users and things happening in parallel. That's true on the inside of the building as well as the outside of the building.
Right. I also think that, you know, Jamie, one of the things that I found unique about this design process was just how much we talked about 4 seasons. And obviously the garden has a high season in the warmer months, but the wintertime was so important to extend that experience and have it be wonderful. We talked so many times about microclimates and really the south side. I think the entire design team is just super excited. I can't wait to see how this is going to be experientially, but you can really see it as this crossroads of people really coming together.
And the place really, I mean, it's the lobby or the entrance, and as you say, it's a lobby that's both the beginning of your experience and the ending of your experience, or maybe for those few people that are going to the restaurant or not experiencing the garden. So I know a lot of work has gone into the details, the materials, the flexibility of the lobby, and that's one of the most unique features, I would say, of the project.
Yeah.
It is, and there was a lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of effort and a lot of time spent with the garden internally within the design team, kind of working through how that lobby wanted to feel and what that experience wanted to be. And we talked about, you know, some of this with the inside and the outside, and this notion of experiencing the lobby itself. And so one of the first things we did was take a step back and say, you know, in a garden, what is that feeling in the garden? What's the sense that you want to have walking through or moving through that space? So, you know, we looked to nature and we thought about being in the woods, being in the forest. What's that quality of light that comes through? What does it do to the shadow patterns on the ground? And how can we, you know, architecturalize that? How can we make that a really significant piece of the building? And so the concept for the scrims really started there. It started with thinking about a tree canopy and taking that and actually pixelating it, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there, into a pattern that we then templated onto some mock-ups that we had in our office. And from there, start to take a look at what does that do to the space. Now, this is something that's in process, so we're still working with the garden to make sure that we get the right image and the right particulars about the details of it. But you can see from these models, you know, we wanted to see what does that do to the space overall, just from a proportional and experiential standpoint. So we did a lot of modeling, both three-dimensional, as you can see here, and then breaking it apart into pieces. And here we're at our office again, holding up some of those pieces to the sun and then seeing, you know, if you hold it up at this height, what does it do to the shadow pattern? If you move it down here, you know, really kind of playing with some of the details of what that feels like. These are very fun days at our office, by the way, when everybody else in the office is looking out the window and you have people shimmying these pieces of chipboard up and down. And we actually have a video here of one of the explorations we did in our office. I don't know if you remember the conversation around this, Luann, but really taking a look at the shadows, at the shadow play here.
Yeah, Absolutely. And Tim changing the lights and thinking about what would the winter sun look like? What would the summer sun look like? How would the patterns change? Um, I remember she really wanting those panels to move. Remember that? We talked about kind of what could be in this. So it's just been a fascinating exploration.
Is the pattern is actually derived from landscape forms, or is it an abstract? Is it made up sort of abstract, or is it sort of it's inspired by, but not literally, leaves in the forest?
Yeah. So we have talked about a bunch of different options with the garden, and we have some time, even though the project is under construction, we have some time to work through those details. So those haven't been completely locked in at this point, but I'll say that the design that we have now is literally pulled from images of forest canopy. So it is a process of taking those images, pixelating it, separating the shadows from the highlights, and then turning that into a pattern that can be put onto a piece of metal. And so where we'll work with the garden is to make sure whether they have photographs that they want us to use, or whether there's particular forests or patterns that they want to see integrated into this, we have the flexibility to be able to do that. And so that's something that'll be coming as we keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
We've even talked about little details, like if you take that entire scrim and you count up the number of holes that have been drilled into the material, how would that relate to the species that the garden, that are planted in the garden, or that are studied or impacted worldwide? Or how can we kind of translate in a literal sense information back and forth, and kind of expressing just the sheer scope and impact that the garden has on people's lives?
Yeah. So we did that.
This palette, which I
was gonna say, so some of that is very kind of customized for the garden. I think even the stuff that is not custom made for the garden, the idea of having the garden represented in those interior materials is really important. And so having natural materials, you talked about the zinc from the outside, which is a natural material, and then all of the use of the wood that moves through the space, really feeling like even when you're inside, there's pieces of the exterior that are pulling you through. And so the color palettes, the materials, the textures, the patterns, all are derived from the natural world.
And on the lower left, I see both carpeting and terrazzo, and then I think for me, one of the unique qualities, there are a lot in the lobby, but the leaves. Talk a little bit about the leaves.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when we thought about the lobby as a whole, and think about this tree canopy overhead and the light quality coming through, we thought, wouldn't it be really fun to take that to the next level and say, okay, well, if that's the tree canopy, what if the trees are dropping their leaves and they're laying on the forest floor? So the terrazzo, which is this mix of cementitious material with stones, so there'll be some kind of stone like quality to it. The intent here is to inlay these brass leaves into the terrazzo and kind of sprinkle them throughout the lobby, have them move throughout the complex, so that it's kind of whimsical, but it's also significant. These are not going to be just kind of random leaf patterns, but again, working with the garden and the horticultural team to understand, do these want to be leaves of trees that are native to St. Louis? Do they want to represent some of the horticultural work that the garden's doing throughout the entire world? Maybe they're trees from Asia that the botanical garden is researching or something. So that will have, again, another embedded significance for the garden, for the visitors that come.
And it'll be nice to sort of tell that story, whether it's on the video screen or in pamphlets or in other ways, to sort of highlight the way you are doing now, the different features that are unique to the project, and what the derivation was will be really a cool opportunity.
Yeah. And so, one of the other pieces that's in the lobby, and talking about kind of information, we know that the visitor engagement desk that's in there Ridgeway Center now is such a critical piece of that information sharing. As people come to the garden for the first time, but also folks that have been there, that, as Luann mentioned, go every week, but want to know what's new, what new event is happening, which new flowers are blooming, things like that. So we'll have a similar type of desk, same concept, but an evolution of where it is now. One that integrates the what's in bloom, but also provides flexibility for events as people may be using the auditorium or the classroom, making this a bar or some opportunity for other types of kind of registration and things that will happen. So this is really kind of thought of as a multi-use space, but really gets into the details at the same time of how do the bud vases sit within the desk? What are the lights doing above the desk there? They're shown as this kind of fun, playful piece, but really could be representative of raindrops or starlight at night or fireflies. And so the kind of biophilic nature of how all of this comes together is really kind of woven into everything that we're thinking about in the lobby and throughout the project.
Great. I really like this view as well, because to me, it's like this critical moment where your visit is really taking to the next level. So you've arrived, you've come through the North Garden, you've come in, you've either used the restroom or not, you're in this lobby, you've had a memorable experience, you've bought a ticket, or you've somehow, engaged with ticketing. Maybe you came with your ticket already ready, that's scanned. Here you are at the information desk, you're engaging with passionate people who want to help you have a great visit. Immediately beyond that desk, you see that glassy piece, that's the auditorium, whether you might be going for a lecture or event. And then beyond that is the conservatory that Joel touched on. Beyond that is the tram stop. So you can kind of see how the building, while on the one hand, we want it to be memorable, we also want it to almost have the experience unfold for the visitor. Like the building's just getting out of the way right at the right time. So you can go from one to the next, to the next, to the next piece of the experience.
So I know there are a lot of, any building this complex and project this complex is filled with challenges, but challenges can be opportunities. And we've had already some successes in terms of the mock-up and the samples and the way the process has worked. But what are you two, being so intimately involved, most excited about, struggled with, see as an amazing, unique opportunity of this project? And there are many, but just to highlight a couple would be fun.
Well, I think that one of the really significant pieces of this project is the way that sustainability is handled. Sustainability is obviously one of those things that's a very hot topic. People are talking about it, people are thinking about it. But this is something that is very personal to the mission of the garden and very important to the success of the project as a whole. And so, we took a lot of time with the garden to understand from them what were the really important pieces when we talk about sustainability and how that relates to the project. It's not just about checking boxes and getting certifications, but what's going to make the biggest impact, and what do they see as the most significant pieces here. And so here's just a few of those pieces, but they're really important. As you mentioned, Jamie, the entire south facade is glass. So how do we handle shading and daylighting so that we're not adding a lot of additional heat load into the building? The zinc pieces, those solid pieces, are super insulated pieces, and we have thermal breaks. There's a lot of effort that went into detailing those to really be responsive. The garden will have a solar PV array on the building, and we've actually worked with our mechanical engineers to move a lot of equipment off the roof so that we could maximize the amount of PV space up there. Rainwater cisterns that the garden uses currently in other areas of the garden. There'll be 2 cisterns associated with this one so that the water can be used to water their plants. And then also thinking about natural ventilation On this type of project, oftentimes you don't have a lot of operable windows. It is very mechanical intensive. But here we deliberately focused on making that lobby space and the conservatory have natural ventilation features so that you can have this kind of natural airflow move through that space. And again, just kind of reinforcing that notion or that feeling of being outside.
And then, of course, much of this is in the systems and the mechanical design and on the roof, as you say, but will really be a big part of the operations of the building. But I would imagine and know there are places also to express the sustainability priority of the garden and the design, and that will be important too, to tell the story of all of the great technical and sustainable strategies that are being used.
Yeah. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities to that, and some of them will be more subtle, and some of them will be, a lot more clearly kind of stated. We look at the spaces like the dining area here and think that it tells a great story about sustainability. And this is really connecting with nature. This is one of those spaces where you just want to be. You want to sit down in this space. You want to be right up along the glass. You want to experience the garden. And again, thinking about this flow from inside to outside, you can see it in the ceiling plane, you'll see it on the floor treatment. So blurring that line and making you feel, even when you're inside, that you're outside as well. But, there also are these biophilic elements, the things up in the ceiling that are kind of reminiscent of flower petals or, kind of natural forms. The screens that you see here that look like what's happening in the lobby, but another piece that we're going to work through with the garden to really make this personal and relevant for the garden's mission and their work and what they want to express. When you actually enter the dining area of Sassafras, we're looking to find a felt log that can actually be turned into the bench for the seating as you first enter. So again, thinking about how significant that would be, telling the story of what that tree is and where it came from, all things that help elevate that sense of sustainability and mission for the garden.
And I know one of the other challenges has been how to keep this project open, how to keep the garden open and the visitor experience and all of the pieces that go along with that, both functional and as part of the Welcome to the Garden active while construction is underway. And I know the solution there in terms of logistics and design and construction is quite unique, I would say, for this project.
It is. This is. You mentioned Alberici back in the opening there, and this was one of the real significant kind of watershed moments of the project. Was as we're talking about this design and thinking about how can it be sequenced and how would it work, thinking about the event center and the pre-function space really took on a new meaning when Alberici. We kind of figured that it could be built while the Ridgeway Center was still operational. So, Alberici helped clarify what that would mean and how it could be phased. But if you think about it in terms of 3 phases, we're in construction of phase 1 now, which means that the Ridgeway Center is operational. Visitors are entering as they normally would through the Ridgeway Center, and this event center is being built currently. And you can see some of the construction photos there on the bottom. At the end of October, when the event center is completed, it will be the temporary visitor center for the garden. And what will happen at that point is that the Ridgeway Center will be demolished. The rest of the visitor center will be built. And then once that is finished and occupiable, the entrance will move back to the original, to the main visitor center entry, and then the temporary visitor center will be renovated into its final form. So I know that's very confusing and kind of back and forth, but to your point, Jamie, what that does is it allows the garden to stay fully operational, to still have events and still have people visiting on a daily basis. And the exciting thing for people visiting in the interim, before the full visitor center is open, is that you'll be kind of in the construction experience. You'll kind of be in this shell of a space that has a kind of a pop-up feel to it. You'll still have the gift shop, you'll still have some grab and go food options, and then obviously ticketing and restrooms behind this. But it'll kind of give you a little bit of this behind the scenes feel. So I think that'll be really interesting for folks. It'd be a fun experience. But again, this is not where it winds up. Ultimately, it does get, I'll say renovated, but the construction, will be finished. And that same space that you just saw in those renderings actually turns into this, which is the event space on the right-hand side of the screen. You can see these operable glass walls that open up that really allow this flow from the event space into this kind of foyer or pre-function space. And then again, through the glassy walls, and that continuity of materials flows directly outside. So, this is a great opportunity, a great flexible space to have conferences, to have weddings, to have, indoor festival events. And then thinking about what does that do in the evening? Again, that kind of flow in and out, and having an outdoor room that's an accessory to these indoor spaces is really, I think, a unique and fun opportunity for the garden. And here you could actually start to get a sense of how an event could be happening here while still activities happening at the visitor center beyond. So just an exciting opportunity for the garden.
And I know at the other end, at the western end, is another exciting feature, very different from this, but really celebrating the mission and of the garden would be the conservatory.
Yeah. Right. So on the complete opposite side, on the southwest side of the visitor center, you do have that floral conservatory. And as we were talking to the garden and understanding the significance of the conservatory and how much effort and attention is put into the plantings and the design of the horticulture and the landscape in this area, how do we celebrate that? How do we amplify it? How do we put it on display? And so locating it where it is, having glass on all three sides of it, so that everyone can experience it, whether you're in the conservatory or whether you're just walking past it. It really becomes an area on display. And so that became a feature, a real kind of feature of the design is anchoring with the conservatory on one side and the event center on the other side, really kind of anchoring the full visitor center experience. And then you'll see, as Luann mentioned, the tram stop. You'll see the trellis that moves out in front of the conservatory and then makes a right-hand turn. The notion here is that this is an extension of the trellis that runs along the entire south facade. So a very kind of continuous, consistent feel upon that. But the nice thing here is that trellis has glass on top of it. So you could actually enter the visitor center at the front door, pick up your tickets, go past the conservatory, come out the door here, and then go to the tram stop, being completely under shelter the entire way. So on days where the weather might not be fantastic, or you just want to get directly to the tram to keep moving, you have that opportunity with the way that it's designed.
I mean, there really are so many different outdoor environments, shielded, fanned, dining, the front garden, or the south garden, the north garden. I mean, I think that diversity of types of spaces and these blurred lines of inside and outside will be pretty powerful and serve all the different needs or demands that the building has and the garden has.
And this is where we can't thank the garden team enough for giving us this expertise. A lot of this space is replacing space that exists currently. Some of it is new space that the garden doesn't have. And so, areas like the tram stop, we're able to hear from the garden, well, what works well now and what would we improve if we could? So a lot of that type of conversation happens for these types of spaces. when we were talking about the event center, that's something that's brand new. That's a new venue, a new opportunity. So there, it's really kind of all of us together imagining what could be, what could happen in the future. How could we envision these spaces working? So it has really been an amazing team effort across the board.
Right. An enormous amount. I would also say we've been talking a lot about, it's inspiration from nature and how it's going to work. And so much about this building is just about people and the kind of humanity of visiting this place and how wonderful and really delightful it can be. There's an enormous amount of technology that's been built into the building as well. And so we're really excited about that and how, Joel, I can remember the first time you and I came and stayed into the evening and went to one of the evening light shows, and how the garden staff just is so fantastic at transforming, a building that you just saw a few minutes ago, or a space that you just saw a few minutes ago. The garden, looks totally different with lighting and the technology that's going to be able to be used for this project. I think it's just going to be exciting.
And I think you have one final slide that sort of gives an overview. And maybe just to dwell on that for a minute and just make sure, just trying to think if there's anything we missed. What I think is also going to be amazing is how this looks in the evening from different points of view in the city, from the highway maybe even, from your approach, and that it would be customizable, as you say, with lights, depending on the event or the time of year, that the LED lights would be adjustable. And it really is a beacon for the city in a way, as that iconic lighthouse, drawing people to it, and it helps with clarity of wayfinding for sure.
It's a balance of trying to figure out what is something that feels like it's always been there, something that feels so of the garden and so relevant. You can't imagine it not having been there, but still bring this kind of excitement and this as you mentioned, Jamie, this kind of beacon, the sense of being an attraction and a destination and being something really special and magical. So kind of balancing those two pieces has been, a really fun puzzle for us all to put together.
It's been a very special project for us, I have to say. I think the love and just competence and deep professionalism that the garden brings to the project is really amazing. And just the love that St. Louis and the garden community has for this place is it's been very inspirational for us, and it's been a really special project.
Well, thank you so much, Luann and Joel. I hope this offered a glimpse. I mean, it's hard to squeeze in a whole project into an hour. And as we've said, there'll be future sessions, we hope, that focus on different areas of interest and pieces of this project as it evolves. But it's nice to be able to share and to have Luann and Joel share some of the architectural features, both the process and the finished product. And as phase one is complete, I mean, you'll be able to get a sense of what the architecture feels like in terms of the stone and the zinc and the different materials, not on the interior, because that's more like the pop-up, but the exterior, you'll get a sense of what the glass south, the wall of the beautiful stone on the north, and the zinc. So I think there's sort of a teaser in phase one of what the building will look like, especially from the outside. So thank you both so much, and for a great conversation. And thank you to everybody at the garden for hosting this and making it possible, and for working together on this. It's been a privilege for me to be both the moderator and to be part of the steering committee that's been shepherding this project from the start. And I'm very eager to see the continuing construction, how that every day more happens on site, and it's terrific to see things in real life. That it's pretty hard. It's amazing to see these renderings and the sketches, and that there's already a building to see. Sometimes that
it's moving quickly. Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, it's been great, and it's been amazing to work with everybody at the garden, with the board, the trustees, and with the design team as well. Now it's my pleasure, though, to turn it over to Patty Arnold, who is the Vice President of Institutional Advancement for the garden, and she will have a few closing remarks for today's session.
Well, thank you, Jamie. And let me second the praise and appreciation of Joel and Luann. I'm sure that all the members that have joined us today have gotten a real sense of what the three of you add to this project. It's really been amazing. But a project as inspirational as our visitor center is only possible because of the outstanding creative work from your firm. And we are so lucky to have you as a partner, all three of you. And we appreciate you taking time to share your part of the story with our members. And what you've seen here today is just the beginning. And what a beginning it is. When we open the Jack C. Taylor Visitor Center in 2022, we'll welcome more visitors, we'll teach more children, we'll offer more classes, and we'll plant more of the endangered species that we're so good at protecting. And of course, we'll host more programming for you, our members. We're so fortunate to have such an incredible philanthropic support getting us to where we are now on this privately funded project. In fact, we have raised nearly $88 million towards our $100 million goal. But there is still work to be done. And with your help and in a few short years, we will welcome visitors from across the area, the region, and the entire world to our new gleaming gateway to the garden. Please consider supporting this effort today. I or members of the institutional advancement team are always available to talk through the many ways to give. Or you can always go online to learn more about the project and see our live construction feed, or make a gift at mobot.org/Taylor Center. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. And although we could not be together in person, we're glad that you took the time to you chose to spend some time with us today. We look forward to future sessions like this where we can explore some of the more specific aspects of this project, including the incredible landscape design that will include plants being grown at the Ertley Hardy Plant Nursery and the sustainable and green features of the new visitor center. So until then, please stay safe and well, and thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Thank you all.